The ins and outs of property ownership in Oklahoma can be pretty complex, and when you throw in oil and natural gas management, it doesn't get any simpler. But all of this doesn't have to be confusing. Today, we're going to break down what it means to own property and the rights, terms, and legalities associated with ownership and ownership transfer. We'll also learn exactly how to describe where a piece of property is located. So let's dive right in. First, we'll meet Stephen.
Hey there.
Stephen owns a piece of property in Oklahoma, which he inherited from his parents. His parents also left him Reggie the pug. Stephen has fee ownership of this property, meaning he owns the rights to the surface of the land and any minerals below the surface as well. This is also known as surface interest and mineral interest.
Minerals, huh? Like diamonds?
Maybe, but usually in Oklahoma, minerals mean oil and natural gas.
Yeah, I knew that. We'll just put this away for now.
Stephen's land is somewhere in Adair County, Oklahoma. But where exactly? Well, the answer to that question is very important when it comes to the exploration of oil and natural gas. We'll need to use the property's legal description based on the United States Rectangular Survey, which is just a big grid system. We'll be learning some fancy map terms like township, range, section, and section subdivision. So let's get to it. Stephen's property is legally described as Section 36, Township 18 North, Range 24, East Indian Meridian, Adair County, Oklahoma. So let's find out exactly where the property is. Using the rectangular survey, we see that there are two meridians, or dividing lines, in Oklahoma. One's called the Cimarron Meridian. It's used in the Panhandle. The other one, the Indian Meridian, is used for the rest of the state. These meridians are starting points for ranges. Ranges run east to west of the meridian lines. Stephen's property is located in Range 24 East. Now we have to find the north-south location. Going back to the rectangular survey, find the baseline extending from east to west. There it is. All townships run north and south from this baseline and are numbered as you count north or south of the baseline. Township 18 North is right there. This information narrows down the location of Stephen's property to be in a 6-mile square of the state. To find where in that square's property is, we use section and subdivision information. Let's go a little deeper. Township 18 North, Range 24 East has 36 sections. Each section is usually 1 square mile and is broken up further by a numbering system that zigzags, running from right to left, then left to right, alternating from top to bottom. Stephen's property is Section 36, right there. Each section, being a square mile, has 640 acres, and Stephen's property is a full section, so he has 640 acres of fee ownership. Stephen can do a number of things with his ownership, including selling it, transferring ownership of the surface or mineral rights to someone else, or negotiating leases with oil companies for drilling. But we might be getting ahead of ourselves with all that. Let's back up and talk about something called severance, because you might hear that word thrown around. Severance is simply the separation of mineral interest from other interests of the property, like the surface. When surface interests and mineral interests are severed, that means they're no longer connected to each other. Get it? Severance, severed. I think you get it. But let's look at an example. Let's say Stephen doesn't want to mess with negotiating leases with oil companies or managing long-term royalties. In fact, he really just wants to get some quick cash to get deep into the pug breeding game. So Stephen decides he wants to move forward with severance of the property, conveying, or selling, the mineral interest to his sister Brenda, but retaining the surface interest for himself. What does that mean exactly? Well, by retaining the surface interest to his property, Stephen can use the above-ground surface of the land in any way he pleases, including the construction and development of his free-range pug reserve. But as far as the rights to the minerals underground, those mineral rights have been sold to Brenda. Stephen only has surface rights, which is exactly what he wants. Win-win. And what about Brenda? Well, being the opportunist that she is, she decides to pursue the development of the land for producing oil and natural gas. She can do this because she owns the mineral interest. That means she has the right to enter the land, explore it for minerals, execute oil and gas leases, and best of all for Brenda, receive bonus, rentals, and royalty payments. Good for you, Brenda. Remember when Stephen sold or conveyed his mineral interest to Brenda? Well, that was way more than just a handshake deal. In fact, when conveying property, it's extremely important that everything is in writing. And I'm not talking about a birthday card, although that might be nice. There are a number of instruments of conveyance available for use when conveying property, and the circumstances of the deal dictate which type is used. These are things like patents, decrees, and deeds, legal documents that name the parties involved, what's being given, and when and how it's going to happen. And once they're all filled out, they must be signed, sealed by a notary to make it official, and recorded at the county courthouse. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of the differences between surface and mineral interest, how to use legal descriptions, and what it looks like to pass property rights between parties. All of this information is extremely important to understand when it comes to management of oil and natural gas. When you think of the idea of striking oil, what comes to mind? Perhaps images of black gold bubbling up to the surface? Maybe even a gusher shooting a geyser high into the air while you and your loved ones explode in a celebration under an oil-soaked umbrella. Chances are you won't accidentally start a Beverly Hillbilly-style gusher on your land by digging a ditch, and the days of oil geysers are pretty much a thing of the past. To really understand how oil and natural gas are produced, we need to take a good look at what's going on underground and where these natural resources come from in the first place. Many people think that oil is found in gigantic pools deep within the earth, but that's simply not the case. In fact, oil and natural gas are actually stored and found in tiny pores of rock underground. And traditionally, it was only available to us in very porous rocks called reservoir rocks. These rock types have billions of connected pores which allow oil and natural gas to flow freely between them. Up until very recently, the traditional exploration and drilling method was to search for areas with sufficiently thick layers of conventional reservoir rock and drill straight down into them. Then the pressure from the reservoir rock would help to push up the oil and natural gas to the surface. And that worked great, for a while. Fun fact for you, the oil in these reservoir rocks didn't start there. It migrated from a different type of rock deeper within the earth, something we call source rock. Source rock was generated by the breakdown of the fossil remains of billions of tiny organisms, hence the term fossil fuels. Heat and pressure converted these organisms into oil and gas. Think of the source rock like the kitchen where the oil is cooked. Sounds delicious, right? You see, most of the large conventional reservoirs have now been found, so we had to find a new way to tap into the remaining unconventional reservoir rocks. Drilling companies have had to innovate and create new ways to tap directly into the source rock, that is. These methods include horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, and they're the main drilling methods used today. You may be wondering how drilling companies locate places to drill in the first place. The days of wildcat discoveries based on guesswork or trial and error are long gone. Exploring for new oil and natural gas accumulations today can be extremely difficult and expensive. So companies do their homework and leverage a huge variety of sophisticated technologies at every turn to minimize the risk before they ever start drilling. And as they say, knowledge is power, and gaining a basic understanding of oil's origin story will only benefit you in the proper management of oil and natural gas. Many steps must be taken before the drilling of an oil and natural gas well can begin. For starters, things like locating areas of interest where the well will be drilled. There's also the task of tracking down mineral interest owners and negotiating leases, which can be a bit of a process, to say the least. First, let's talk about how oil and gas companies decide where to drill. With hundreds of thousands of dollars that'll be invested, you can bet they do their homework long before setting foot on a piece of property. So let's meet Sarah. Sarah is a landman.
Landwoman, technically. But yeah, that's what they call us.
My job is to acquire oil and gas leases from mineral owners for oil and gas exploration.
Sarah is the person who locates the mineral owner and negotiates these leases from the land records in the county clerk's office in the local courthouse. Sarah works for Blue Sky Oil. Through technologies such as surface images, satellite images, and 3D seismic imaging, Blue Sky Oil has identified a piece of property they're interested in. Now it's up to Sarah to do her research and identify the interest ownership of the property. You may think it would be as easy as knocking on the door of someone who lives on the property, but many times the surface interest and the mineral interest of a particular parcel of land have been separated, which is known as severance. It's also likely that there are many parties who have mineral interest on one section of land as well, and they all must be contacted. Needless to say, Sarah stays pretty busy as she works to establish ownership rights and start lease negotiations. A lease outlines the terms of the exploration and the processes which must be followed. In the agreement, it also outlines what the mineral owners will receive and grants exclusive rights to explore, drill, and produce oil and gas from that particular piece of land. Standard lease forms are available, however, the lease terms are all negotiable. And if drilling in the area is proven successful, mineral rights become more valuable. Because leases are legal documents, they sound like legal documents, filled with certain terms, clauses, provisions, and legal speak. You should become familiar with these terms if you're going to successfully navigate a lease. So let's take a look. The parties involved are called the lessor and the lessee. Can you guess which is which? Well, in our example, Sarah's company, Blue Sky Oil, is the lessee, the party receiving the lease. And the parties involved that are granting exploration rights to their property are the lessors. Dates are important when it comes to leases, and there are a few date-related terms you should be aware of. The first term we'll talk about is the effective date. The effective date is when the primary term of the lease actually begins, even if the lease is signed months in advance. Speaking of signing, that date has a clever name too. It's called the signature date. And when a notary gets their hands on it, there's a fancy name for that as well. It's called the date of acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that, unfortunately, none of these dates involve going to a fancy restaurant with that special someone. Let's talk about a few additional terms you'll likely come across. Bonus payments, usually based on acreage, delay rentals, paid when there's a drilling delay, and royalties, or a share of the production from the well. You get the bonus payments and the delay rental payments during the primary term, which is stated in the lease. This is the length of time the leaseholder has to get ready to drill. And if they haven't started by the time the primary term ends, they could lose their lease. The primary term can be cut short if the leaseholder surrenders the lease or fails to properly pay delay rentals. Once drilling starts, the primary term ends and the secondary term begins, and will extend the lease through the production. Speaking of production, when production occurs, all delay rentals will be stopped and royalty payments will begin, which, if you remember, is the leaseholder's share of the production income. But what if the landowner does not own the minerals? When the owner of the land is not the mineral owner, a separate agreement must be negotiated, spelling out compensation for damages to the property. Now let's talk money. This section is called the royalty clause, and it just might be the part of the lease you're most interested in. Remember, the royalties are the share of the production proceeds, and it's stated in the lease as a fraction, like an eighth, 3/16, or a quarter. As with all terms of a lease, this portion is negotiable. After leases are negotiated and recorded in the proper counties, it's time for the drilling title opinion. This is a legal document which is drawn up by an attorney from Blue Sky Oil. It identifies all parties who have mineral interest in the property where the well will be drilled. The drilling title opinion identifies any issues in each owner's title and presents solutions to those problems. This is all in an effort to make sure the exploration company actually does have the right to drill on that land. Now that Sarah, the landman, has done her job with this property by locating mineral owners and negotiating leases, and Blue Sky Oil has gone through the process of writing a drilling title opinion, this property is ready for drilling. The exploration and management of oil and natural gas minerals can be a lengthy but rewarding process. Knowing what terms to expect will only help you when you're going through the process yourself. Drilling an oil and/or natural gas well is quite complex. It requires sophisticated technology and a lot of science. Let's take a look at what's involved. Let's say Blue Sky Oil is interested in drilling a well in Oklahoma. They've tracked down the mineral and landowners, negotiated leases, and filed all of the necessary paperwork with the proper authorities. Blue Sky Oil has crossed their T's and dotted their I's, so it should be time to drill a well, right? Not quite. First, the site has to be prepared. And while surface impact is always kept to an absolute minimum, there are necessary measures that must be taken in order to safely transport people and equipment to the site. This includes surveying, clearing and leveling of the well site, and building access roads. Now that Blue Sky Oil has prepared the site, it's time to drill. This is the part that everyone is most familiar with, and it includes a big derrick, a crew, and an industrial strength drill bit. Looks pretty serious, doesn't it? There are two primary methods of drilling: horizontal and vertical. Vertical wells are still drilled today. However, new technological advancements have made horizontal drilling a much more widely used method. Horizontal drilling involves drilling down vertically thousands of feet to a predetermined depth, then, through the use of sophisticated technology, slowly angling and driving the drill bit and drill string horizontally. The various layers of pipe and cement used throughout the process ensure the protection of groundwater and the integrity of the well. Why drill horizontally, you ask? There are significant advantages to drilling horizontally over vertically. For starters, drilling horizontally increases the contact between the reservoir rock and the wellbore, which efficiently recovers more oil and natural gas. A single pad site can be used to drill multiple horizontal wells in different directions, like spokes on a bicycle wheel shooting out horizontally beneath the surface of a single site above. It would take multiple vertical wells to produce the same amount of oil and natural gas as one horizontal well. Once the well has been drilled, the rig is dismantled and removed, so completion work can begin. The completion crew installs a valve at the top of the well and lowers a perforating gun down the well bore. This gun fires at specific intervals and creates small perforations, or perf tunnels, through the casing and rock. Then hydraulic fracturing can begin. A liquid mixture is pumped down the well at a high pressure, fracturing the rock. This process of perforation and fracturing is repeated, spanning the length of the horizontal section of the well. At the top of the well, a permanent wellhead known as a Christmas tree is installed to control the flow of oil and natural gas, which is pumped into separators and storage tanks. Once the well is completed, the operator has 30 days to file a completion report with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. At that point, they can begin the process of selling. Oil and natural gas production has evolved through the years, adapting to supply and demand of the market. Advances in technology allow for producers to limit surface impact while extracting greater quantities of oil and natural gas, which is great news for everyone involved, from the landowner to the producer to those with mineral interest in the property. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of the complex process of extracting oil and natural gas, and the advantages of updated techniques such as horizontal drilling. By understanding what goes into production, you can confidently navigate the management of oil and natural gas more effectively. Once a well has been drilled, completed, and is producing, it's time to start talking about what to do with all that crude oil and natural gas. Spoiler alert, the well operator will want to sell it. So let's take a look at an example of how this could work. Blue Sky Oil is an exploration company who's leased a piece of property for drilling. They've negotiated leases and agreements with surface and mineral interest owners and have already completed a well on the property. In fact, they've even set up contracts with purchasers for selling the oil and natural gas. So now it's time to think about divvying up the proceeds from production. The division order title opinion documents the legal owners, what percentage of the production they own, and if there's any issues with the title. The attorney from Blue Sky Oil will prepare this document. The division order title opinion says who all the owners are, what they own, and if there's any problems in the way. Generally, this process takes about 3 to 4 months, but if there are lengthy or complex titles, it may take longer. In Oklahoma, payment must be made within 6 months, or interest on the revenue is due to all owners. The division order title opinion is chock full of details and information. Everything from the legal description of the property, to the materials examined, to listing out everyone with interest in the well. It also calls out any title problems that need to be addressed before payments can be made. The division order title opinion protects a company like Blue Sky Oil by ensuring the title is clear before revenues are dispersed. If title issues remain, a company can put payments into suspension. If this happens, the company is required to pay interest on the suspended monies consistent with market rates. Now it's time for Blue Sky Oil to slice up the pie and calculate interest. Let's say, for a simple example, you own 100% mineral interest for a full section. That's 640 acres. Your lease agreement states that you will receive 3/16 percentage shares of production. That means your royalty is 18.75% share of sales. Once the interest calculations are made, each interest owner will receive a document called a division order. This document lists the names of the interest owners, the percentage of production the interest owners own, and personal information. They also have the name, address, and tax ID or social security number for each owner. Regulations differ from state to state, but in Oklahoma, division orders are not required before payments are made. But your right to receive payment is what the division order is all about. So you'll want to get your hands on one if you have interest in the well. Let's talk about taxes for a second. Even if you don't sign the division orders, a tax ID number or social security number is required. And this is really important because if one is not provided, the companies distributing the revenue are required to withhold 31% from your payment. Trust me, you'll want to provide a tax ID or social security number. Or if you qualify, you can provide a copy of certification of tax exemption. Now that interest has been calculated and the division orders properly executed, it's time for the part that everyone is most excited about, the payments. As you begin receiving revenue checks, it's important to learn what information to look for and how to decipher it. At first look, they can seem a little overwhelming, but all these tables, categories, and percentages are simply telling interest owners about their mineral production. Take some time to look over these revenue checks and familiarize yourself with the information. If problems arise or you have any concerns about how your interest is being handled, you can always contact the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. Good oil and gas management is the key to making sure your venture into oil and gas development is a successful one. By properly managing your mineral interest, you'll have the advantage of knowledge and experience on your side.